This is the story of a man who was laughed at by an entire village, who could not get a single job, and who had completely lost his confidence, yet transformed not just his own life, but the destiny of everyone around him, using nothing but a sunrise. If your confidence is gone, this story will bring it back. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, what was the lowest moment in your life when you lost confidence in yourself? In a small village near the great king's castle, there lived a young man named Boaz. He had no land, no trade, and no father to teach him a skill. His mother was sick, and hunger was their daily companion. Every morning, Boaz walked the dusty streets looking for work, but every door closed with an insult. The first door he knocked on was the blacksmith's forge. The blacksmith, a huge man with arms like iron, laughed loudly. You can barely lift a hammer. Go away before you hurt yourself, useless boy. Boaz tried the baker. The baker tossed a stale crust at his feet and sneered, "Even my dog wouldn't eat bread from a man who brings bad luck." Children in the square pointed and sang, "No job, Boaz! No job, Boaz!" The farmer needed hands for harvest, but when Boaz offered his help, the farmer shoved him back. "You'll spoil my crop with your cursed shadow. Get lost." The worst came when a merchant's caravan passed through. Boaz begged the captain to let him guard the goods. The captain spat on the ground. "You are too weak. Your presence alone invites failure. Leave." Broken, Boaz stumbled to a hill outside the village. He looked at the castle on the horizon and thought, "Even the king wouldn't want me. I am nothing." He sat beneath an old olive tree and covered his face. The pain was so deep he could not even cry. He truly believed he was a mistake. But his good friend Noam, a quiet shepherd who had known loss himself, had been watching. Noam climbed the hill just as the sky began to change. He sat beside Boaz without a word. Together, they watched the darkness retreat and the golden light spread across the valley. Then, Noam spoke softly. "Boaz, do you see that? Every sunrise is a second chance. Last night's failures are already gone. The sun doesn't judge you. It simply rises again. So can you." Boaz shook his head. "I have nothing, Noam. No skill, no hope." Noam placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have one thing that the sun itself respects, the power to begin again. Take it one sunrise at a time." That night, Boaz barely slept. Noam's words echoed in his mind. The next morning, before the rooster crowed, he walked to the hill and faced the east. As the first ray touched his face, he whispered, "This is my second chance." It was not easy. The old voices of shame were loud, but he made a rule. Every sunrise, he would stand and repeat those words, then take one small step. The very first day, he decided to try the village market again. He approached Jacob, a grain merchant who once threw a stone at him. His heart pounded. He remembered the sunrise and said, "Sir, I know I failed before, but can I carry your grain sacks to the mill, just for a small loaf of bread?" Jacob was surprised by the quiet respect in Boaz's voice. He shrugged and handed him a heavy sack. Boaz carried it all day, his back aching, but he did not drop a single grain. That evening, Jacob gave him a warm loaf. It was a tiny win, but to Boaz, it tasted like hope. A few days later, while helping Jacob store goods, Boaz's elbow hit a clay pot filled with precious oil. It shattered on the ground. Jacob's face turned red with fury. "You clumsy fool, that was a whole week's earning." The old shame rushed back. Boaz wanted to run, but the next sunrise he stood again. He returned to Jacob and said, "I have no money, but let me work without pay until I repay every drop. Give me a second chance." Jacob stared into his eyes and saw something different: integrity. He agreed. Over many weeks, Boaz learned to mend torn sacks, measure grain, and keep records. Jacob's anger turned into trust, and eventually he made Boaz his shop assistant. A relationship once filled with scorn became a bond. That summer, a cruel drought gripped the land. The village well shrank to a muddy puddle. Panic spread. People Boaz once feared now looked desperate. He recalled the sunrise principle. Every day is a fresh start to help. He remembered a dry riverbed his father had spoken of. While others hoarded water, Boaz took a shovel and walked to the old river. He dug with blistered hands, day after day, certain that a second chance was hidden underground. One dawn, after a week of digging, water burst from the earth. It was a hidden spring. He did not keep it for himself. He filled clay jars and shared with the entire village, even the blacksmith who had called him useless. The elder who once ignored him now bowed his head in gratitude. Boaz's standing began to rise. A young orphan named Nadav sat alone at the edge of the market, his clothes torn, his eyes lifeless. Boaz saw himself in that boy. He knelt down and said, "Nadav, do you know the secret of the sunrise? Every morning it gives you a new beginning. You are not forgotten." He taught Nadav how to read the simple letters Yaakov had taught him and shared his bread. Day by day, the boy began to smile. Nadav became Boaz's helper, and they grew close as brothers. This taught Boaz that healing others healed his own heart. Not everyone was happy. A jealous trader named Dan spread a wicked rumor that Boaz had poisoned the spring water to make people sick. Some villagers looked at Boaz with suspicion. The old hurt returned. He was being rejected again. He lay awake in anger, wanting to shout the truth. But the next sunrise, he chose the path of second chances. He walked to Dan's stall and said calmly, "I forgive you. Let us start fresh. I have no fight with you, only an offer to work together for the village." Dan was stunned into silence. Later, consumed by guilt, Dan came clean to the village and offered to help Boaz build something that would serve everyone. Thus, an enemy became a partner. There was an old woman named Tzilla who once threw mud at Boaz when he begged at her gate. Now she lay sick with fever, forgotten by all. Boaz remembered sunrise mercy. He gathered herbs he had learned from Jacob's store and nursed her through the nights. When she opened her eyes, she wept. "I was cruel to you. Why are you kind?" He said, "Because this sunrise is your second chance too." From that moment, inner bitterness melted away and peace took root in Boaz's soul. With relationships healed and a small circle of trust around him, Jacob, Nadab, Dan, and Tzilla, Boaz saw a deeper problem. The old village mill was run by a greedy man who overcharged and turned away the poor. During drought, farmers had to travel miles, losing precious grain. On one morning, while watching a water beetle glide on the stream, Boaz got an idea. A water mill with a clever wheel that used less water but could grind grain fairly. He would call it the Sunrise Mill. Its rule: if you cannot pay today, you can pay tomorrow. Every sunrise is a second chance. He shared the vision with his friends, and they believed. To build the mill, they needed permission from the village council. The headman, a hard man who still remembered Boaz as the no-job boy, refused. You build a mill? Ridiculous. The old voice of rejection echoed loudly, but Boaz did not give up. Every sunrise for 40 days, he stood respectfully at the council door with his plan carved on clay. He did not shout or beg. He simply showed up anew each morning. Eventually, the headman's daughter, who had seen Boaz care for sick Scylla, begged her father to listen. The council granted a small plot by the stream. It was a massive victory. The village came together to build. Women carried stones, men chopped wood. The frame rose proudly. Then, on a night black as despair, a violent storm ripped through the valley. The half-built mill collapsed into the mud. Everyone stood in stunned silence. The old Boaz would have sunk to his knees and given up, but now he walked to the wreckage at dawn, the sun rising behind him, and said, "The sun rose again, so will we. This is our second chance to build it stronger." Nadav, Jacob, Dan, and even the headman picked up hammers. They rebuilt with deeper foundations. At last, on a clear morning, the great wooden wheel began to turn. The whole village gathered, the blacksmith who once mocked, the baker who threw bread, the farmer who shoved him, the children who sang the cruel song. Boaz stood on a stone and spoke, "This mill belongs to no one and everyone. If you come with honest grain, you will leave with honest flour. If you are broken by yesterday, step inside and find your second chance." He opened the doors, and the very first person to enter was the captain who had spat at him. The man lowered his head and asked for flour for his family. Boaz served him with a smile. That day, the sound of grinding stones mixed with laughter and songs. The Sunrise Mill became the heart of the land, and its fame reached the king's castle. Boaz, once the man with no confidence, became a pillar of his village. He learned that confidence is not the absence of failure. It is the deep belief that the sunrise will always come, and with it, the permission to try again. Every broken relationship, every harsh word, every impossible goal was simply a night waiting for dawn. What sunrise are you ignoring? Maybe you failed yesterday. Maybe you are still carrying the shame, but you are not your past. Tomorrow morning, go outside. Watch the light chase away the dark. Whisper to yourself, "This is my second chance," and then take one small step.